This is Live from the Table, the official podcast of the world-famous Comedy Cellar, coming at you on Sirius XM 99 Raw Comedy, formerly Raw Dog. We are also coming at you wherever you get your podcasts, and available as well on YouTube if you want to see our beautiful faces, some more beautiful than others, perhaps. But in any case, here we are in our newly remodeled podcast studio. Not really remodeled.
Not remodeled, it's just
cleaned
cleaned
up.
up.
They cleaned it up a bit. We have a little more room to stretch out. I'm Dan Natterman. I'm here with Noam Dwarman, fast rising star of Twitter, or X, I guess as they call it now. He's up to 5,000 followers with very little effort. I think Noam could, if he really put his mind to it, could become a force on Twitter.
Force to be reckoned with, Dan.
I think so. Periel is here. She is, of course, our producer. We have a guest coming in about a half an hour, but we have some time to talk amongst ourselves about whatever shit we want to talk about. But Periel, you wanted to bring up Princess Jasmine.
I did want to bring up Princess Jasmine.
Who is Princess Jasmine?
She is a Dachshund that I am. I'm
like a dog?
Yeah, dog.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm dog sitting. I've been dog sitting for the
Gilbert's wife's dog.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Gilbert's wife's dog. Gilbert Gottfried's wife's dog. Yeah. So you have a question about that?
She was also Gilbert's dog.
I don't know. Did they buy her when?
Yeah,
Gilbert was...
yeah. Gilbert loved that dog.
Sweet dog.
So he was having a meltdown. I mean, he was having so much anxiety about this dog. Go ahead.
I thought you were going to.
No, you. Can...
Well, yeah. For the last week, I was worried. Like, I have no experience with dogs. I don't know what kind of lunatic leaves a dog with a guy that doesn't know anything about dogs. But be that as it may, I got the gig, and so last week, like I was here, and then you said, well, we're going to have dinner after from Il Molino, and I'm like, shit, but the dog hasn't taken a number 2 all day, and what if it takes a shit in the house? So I run back and I walk, and it still doesn't take a number 2. And then I was like, well, I guess he's not going to do it, or she. And so I ran here and had the dinner.
And then when you got back?
And when I got back, I took him out again. And
Her.
And she didn't, the whole day was nothing. But the next day, she got back on track with the number 2s. So anyway.
The Il Molino was very good, right?
It was excellent.
Yeah.
Well, Il Molino's great. But I was also worried because I had a couple of gigs that weekend. I didn't know. Garrett told me I could leave the dog alone for 8 hours, but that seemed like a long time. And I'm like, should I? I don't know. She would know better than me, but at the same time,
And then he went to therapy, and I said, well, what did you talk about in therapy? And he said, mostly the dog.
Are we getting Abigail Schreier? Because I really want Abigail Schreier.
Okay.
Did you read your email?
No.
Okay.
What did you say? All right. Well, anyway, Abigail Schreier wrote the book Bad Therapy.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Oh, it's this book is changed my life.
Then I would say, put out all the stops to get her on, even if you have to bribe her with the Il Molino.
All right. So, I got you her publicist's name. Did you read your email? All right, listen.
Did you read your fucking email? Because I reached out to her publicist, and I spoke to her publicist, and I sent you what the publicist said to me.
What did the publicist say?
You really want to do this on air?
Is it bad for us?
I think that there are other avenues that we can reach Abigail through. Not her.
Abigail
Schreier, if you are listening to this, listen. I don't think
that one of your Yenta friends know her. She's an Orthodox Jew.
If you want it bad enough, then go for it.
If you read your emails, the difference between us is I read the emails that you send.
Are we going to get back to the dog? I also have other
the dog
topics.
story's not over. I have something I want to talk about. You go ahead and finish with your dog story.
Well, I have other topics as well. Well, the story is now I'm more used to the dog. I kind of like the dog. It's a sweet dog, and everything's going well with the dog.
Have you synchronized your poops?
I got a couple of jokes out of it.
Okay.
But those jokes are from my old act.
Now, I hear distortion on the mics. I hope that's not in the actual recording. Anyway, go ahead.
But I came up with a joke. No, it's not a great joke. It's not a fucking Mr. Morales level joke, but it's a decent joke about, worried, what if something happens to the dog, and how am I going to break the news to Lizzie? I use a fake name. And so what am I going to say? Like, the good news is you only owe me for 3 days of dog sitting. So anyway.
No, wait, but I thought that you weren't telling one-liners anymore. I thought that last week you told us you have a new Dan.
Yeah,
you're going to do extended material.
Yeah, but if something just pops into my head for the old act, I still need my old act for when I'm doing 45 minutes in a venue. I don't have 45 new minutes.
Yeah, but now you could talk about what it was like to be asked and what it's like sitting in the room with the dog. You're making eye contact.
Right. He loves the dog, though. The dog sleeps in bed with him, like snuggled up.
Well, the dog jumps in bed with me. I'm not going to throw the dog out, but I find it rather satisfying. Yes, but I did want to talk about my new act. Unless you have something you feel is more important. I just to review. I think every comedian should change their act every 30 years. I lay a challenge to Chris Rock to now start doing Stephen Wright type material. You know, like my school colors were clear. But no, I think I think that's a good challenge for comedians in general. After 20, 30 years, change it up. My act for our listeners, if you don't know it, is somewhat observational, but also stories about shit that never happened. Attell has the same kind of an act. He tells stories about things that some of it's observational, but a lot of it is stories that never happened.
No baby with a beard was chasing him with
no, or he didn't do the knife game with a half Indian. So I've decided to now pivot to being a little bit more real, talking about issues as well as Dan Natterman in a more real way. I think what broke me is when Louis C.K. went on a podcast and said one of my favorite new jokes is Dan Natterman's Mr. Morales joke about sex education, and nobody gave a shit, you know. And then Noam posted it as well on the Comedy Cellar Instagram feed, and it didn't go viral.
What was the joke again?
Well, you know, the joke was where my sex ed teacher in 9th grade got fired he was inappropriate. He came to class. He said, "Class, today I'm going to demonstrate how to put a condom on. That's why I have this banana with me, because I can't get hard on an empty stomach." and the joke, and then there's a couple of tags that go after that. And I said to myself, well, if that joke's not getting any traction or going viral or semi-viral or even micro-viral, then I'm not going to write anything better than that. Then it's just the definition of insanity, is to do the same thing over and over again and expect a different result. These jokes are fine for, gigs that I have or coming to the comedy side. But if I really want to go viral, if I really want to make a name for myself, it may never happen. But if I want to at least go for it, I have to change my act. I have to do something else, because otherwise it's just beating my head against the wall. If that joke, promoted by Louis C.K., subsequently promoted by the Comedy Cellar, some guy, by the way, did that joke.
Some guy stole it in a foreign language.
What's that?
Did he steal it in a foreign language?
No. I don't think so. But
yes.
Oh, who stole that in a foreign language?
And you responded to it, actually, in German. Somebody.
Oh, you're right. Somebody did. But there was somebody else that did that joke.
Now, if that happened to me, what just happened to you, I'd say I'm losing my mind.
Somebody else did. Yeah.
Say, how could I forget? Somebody that my best joke was translated to German. It's such a memorable thing.
But
it's amazing.
Alzheimer generally hits the short-term memory first. So as I said, giraffe,
pen, giraffe, saxophone.
So anyway, that's a reference to our previous episode. Yeah, another guy did it like he was accepting an award for like podcasting, and our friend Kruger Dunn said that's Dan Natterman's joke. But that joke didn't get anywhere. Then I have to face facts. Nothing I write is going to get anything. I mean, I could write a fucking 100 of those jokes at that level and nobody would give a shit. So I at least have to try something new.
I like this.
Would you concur, Noam, in that?
I've been telling you this for years.
Well, it finally broke me.
We did a whole podcast about this like 5 years ago. I said, Dan, why don't you do long form? The people who are making it are doing.
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's not so easy to change your act, and the evidence that it's not so easy is nobody's doing it. Nobody is changing their act.
Right. But you had a reason. Not to do it.
But I think everybody has a reason. Why not reinvent yourself?
No, I'm saying.
Look at him.
No,
I think it's good. I'm saying at the time, whatever. Good.
No, you were correct.
Yep.
It's just A, it's not so easy to do. You get comfortable. And C, I still thought if I just write that one perfect joke and I'd post it at the right time and, it gets the right repost. But the Louis thing really broke me, because it's like if anything was going to happen, and then, nothing.
I told you, for things to go viral, people need to be able to use it, for the most part, to illustrate something about life, something universal, that a chord that's touched by, whatever it is a person is saying, something about kids or women or whatever it is, or just something. From time to time, a joke will,
yeah, look, if you're already famous and you've already, then it might go out. Anyway, so that's where things are at. And I did the new joke night on Monday. Every Monday we have a new joke night here at the Comedy Cellar, where the audience is told, we're going to tell new jokes. And so it's a little less pressure. So I did that for the first time in like a year, and I got a couple that seemed to work. But I will say, by the way, about the new joke night, it was full. And I still felt pressure. I still didn't feel completely at ease doing new jokes, because even though you tell the people, hey, this is new joke night, they still want a good show. Right. They still want to laugh. And so you have to kind of part of it, they probably are fascinated by the process. And so even if they're not laughing, they might still find it fascinating. But I don't know. What do you think, Noam? I mean, you come to new joke night. To what extent will the audience, even though they know it's new joke night,
you don't tell all new jokes, right? Like, you tell a few.
I didn't have all new jokes, but theoretically, if I had all new jokes, what do you think the audience wants on new joke night? Even though it's called new joke night.
No, they still want to have a good time. Everybody always wants to have a good time.
Right. So
they'll be a little more tolerant.
Yeah.
But they expect,
So I still didn't feel completely.
It's not new shitty joke night.
Right.
Right. Except you don't know if it's shitty.
I know that.
And the audience, as I said, they still probably are fascinated, even if a joke doesn't work, because they're seeing behind the curtain. And I think to some extent that's interesting.
Yeah, I think so too.
Beyond mere, laugh value. But so I wasn't, and I'm uptight. I'm obviously nervous anyway. So I wasn't completely at ease, but I'm more at ease than I would be trying new jokes at the VU on a Friday night. So anyway,
I would just like to point out that Noam is suffering through this episode.
No, I'm not suffering through it. I'm trying to think of some stuff. I'm thinking something on my mind. Anyway, so we had a really upsetting thing here. I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about it. Never mind.
Oh, for the love of God, don't do that.
Anything else?
I have other things, but
a parakeet story?
I do have other things. I have other things. Well,
no, let him go and then you go. Go ahead. What's your thing?
So we had a terrible thing that an employee was beaten up on the subway the other night. He fell asleep going home from work, and some guys descended upon him, and he has stitches here on his face and stitches here on his face. I'm sure he's psychologically traumatized, and came to work today. This hasn't happened. This used to happen years ago. You'd hear these stories.
Well, in the 70s, it's like a joke about, like Woody Allen said, why don't you do Shakespeare in the Park? And Tony Roberts said, I did Shakespeare in the Park. I got mugged.
Yeah.
And that joke wouldn't resonate today because people don't even use the term mugged anymore.
So
where was he going?
Is that he was going,
I'm just curious.
He's going to have. I don't know where.
No. Was he going to Brooklyn? Was he going to Queens? Was he going in the city?
I don't know, but he was on the. I think it was in Brooklyn somewhere. So so he came in and I see his face, and it filled me with such rage. And a lot of things came flooding into my mind. First of all, when the thing first, in no particular order, when October 7th happened, and people were, hacked to death and all these terrible things gleefully, right? Some Israelis lost their composure and bandied about horrible words to describe their animals or this and that, So the first thing I noted was that the words that came to my mind about the people who did this to him were horrible words, like animals. Like, what kind of fucking animals would do this to somebody?
It doesn't seem horrible. It seems too nice. Jasmine's an animal.
And the disconnect between how you're feeling when you say something like that and then how someone, in the calm confines of the, bucolic, kitchen is sipping coffee and hear somebody call somebody animal. Oh, how must you speak that way? About, and then you have to be called to account to be judged for that kind of outburst. Is just very unfair, and I understand why it feels ugly to hear that kind of thing. But the fact is that when you see somebody victimized like that, what words are okay? Oh, it's a very naughty person that would do such a thing like that.
I mean, I think regarding 10-7, they said they felt that the word animal was being applied to the entire Palestinian people.
Well, but that's the thing. That's what will always be said when you use that phrase. That's the thing. That's what always. Nobody actually objects to the fact that you called the murderer an animal, but they'll always try to say, "What are you saying this about?" And I had to be honest. This on my kid's life. I don't know the profile of the person that did this. I have no idea. I didn't ask.
All we know is he wasn't Asian.
No. I don't make jokes. How do you know that?
Well, they're never Asian.
So I would say it's not Hasidic. So anyway,
did they catch? Was it one person or more than one person?
More than two people. So that's right. The second thing that came to my mind is that what the fuck is going through everybody's mind with these policies? We have a DA in New York that ran for office and said that incarceration was the number one, or something like the number one public safety mass incarceration was the number one public safety issue in New York, and set about literally creating new ground rules that they would not seek to incarcerate people for assaults, for all sorts of things that people need to be incarcerated for. And then on top of that, of course, we have the inevitable reaction from the post George Floyd thing and the cops being demoralized. And you can say what you want about the cops, but they are demoralized. And then, just a whole collection of policies and atmospheric beliefs that almost predictably lead to this. And what are we going to do about it? The policies that we had for 20 years, warts and all, with Mayor Giuliani. I don't mean, as I said, not Dr. Jekyll, but Mr. Hyde. Giuliani when he was considered palatable.
Mr. Hyde was the good guy? Mr. Hyde was the bad guy.
But you know what I mean.
Mr. Hyde was the bad guy.
Okay,
right?
so Dr.
Jekyll was...
not Mr. Hyde.
You think Jekyll would be the bad guy because the name Jekyll sounds sinister.
And because Heckle and Jekyll.
I guess.
So I lost my train of thought now. So, and Mayor Bloomberg.
Heckle and Jekyll.
These policies, which did seem harsh at the time, and some of them I at the time thought were too harsh, but in the overall, created this renaissance in New York City. They're not compatible with the current Democratic Party. They're just not. And New York is a one-party town. Such a one-party town that even when these policies lead to the governor of New York feeling that she has to call out the National Guard to deal with crime, there's no risk that New York will say, maybe we should vote for the other party, right? It's off limits, but that's not the way it works. Democracy won't work that way. And does it have to get worse before it gets better? I remember years ago we had talking about crime, and when crime was low, we had some guests on the show who tried to sell us on the fact that actually the crime wave went down not because of any policies. It was because there had been lead paint in the city. Remember that? It was lead paint in the city when we were all kids, and lead paint caused crime. And as they got rid of lead, and if you track the demographics, as people
were those the Freakonomics guys?
It freaks out. I think even Jonathan Haidt gave some credence to this thing. And I was always like, I'm just not buying it. So what's going on now? Lead paint came back? Like something.
Well, this particular incident is just one incident,
right? But I don't ride the subways, but obviously it's not. If they're calling out the National Guard, I'm presuming there's incidents, right?
Yes, crime has risen significantly.
I think say one more thing. And they did, I should have said this earlier. They didn't even rob him. This is what's so troubling, because for years when you want to criticize crime, well, you have to understand poverty, you have to understand injustice, and all these things should be understood, poverty, injustice. But the idea of excusing somebody for putting stitches in somebody's face because of poverty or because of injustice, we shouldn't, I'm not going to buy that. I'm just not going to buy that. If they robbed him for hundreds of dollars, I would say, all right, maybe they got kids. Like, it's possible. At least it's plausible. They got kids at home. He had no. I don't believe that really, but at least you could say that's a story. Which, if it's true, you could say, all right, it's not okay. But they were desperate. They took some money. This had nothing to do with money. They saw a guy in the subway and they hacked up his face.
Okay, so that's
and they didn't even check his pockets to see if he had money. They didn't take his phone. Nothing.
It's horrific. That's really horrible. And
now, what about your fucking tour?
Wait, hold on a second.
Wait a second. I have questions, and you're like, "Who cares?"
Well, first of all, I have a question.
Good.
For Max. Max.
Yeah. Max. Yeah.
Well, no, because we told him it's 6:00.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So, of the topics discussed so far, Prison has Jasmine, Dan's journey into another aspect of comedy, and Noam's soliloquy on crime in New York. What did you find the most riveting?
I like your dog story.
You like the dog story, okay? And he's not the final word. I'll give you that. But he's an important guy.
I have questions, and you're like, "What does it matter where he's going?" These are the first.
Maybe you didn't interrupt my fucking story. I would have been. I interrupt your dumb dog story. Go ahead.
These are the first questions that a police officer would ask. Where was he going? What time was it?
Are you investigating the crime? If you were investigating the crime, I would have taken you more seriously. I didn't realize you were investigating the crime.
Yes, I'm investigating the crime. I want to know what happened. It's a horrific story. And even if you are robbing somebody, which is also fucked up, you don't need to be violent, right? Like, if they really...
Well, if they resist. I'm not... Yes, of course, you're right.
If there was a person on board the subway with a firearm, would he have been within his rights to shoot and kill the assailants?
Yes.
Yeah, that just happened.
If you had a legal firearm, that's what happened to Bernie Getz. Well, he also shot supposedly.
Well, they were walking away, I think. But in other words,
I was always team Bernie Getz.
What is the standard? I think the standard is if another person's life is in danger or in great bodily harm. Like,
look, this is the way I see it. There's a standard, and the standard makes sense that you have a right to use deadly force until right up to the moment that your life is no longer threatened.
Or the life of a second person is no longer threatened.
No, until your life is no longer threatened, then you can no longer use deadly force to protect yourself, because then that makes.
But you can also use deadly force to protect somebody else,
or protect somebody else. But the point is, yes, and that makes perfect sense. But in real life, when people come upon you and your face is cut and this, that, and you have the adrenaline and you've never experienced anything like this in your life, you may not be able to stop right at the moment where a sober and calm jury is going to decide you were no longer threatened. You may get carried away in a moment and shoot somebody in the fucking back. And I have always felt that risk has to be on the person who crossed that line and put you in danger of your life. Now, if you could prove that somebody really wasn't threatened and just opportunistically murdered somebody, of course that's
was
murder.
Bernie's life did he reasonably perceive his life as being in danger?
It's impossible to know. As far as I'm concerned, he gets, if people are coming upon him and threatening his life, and I'm giving him the benefit of the doubt. I'm not putting Bernie Getz in jail because he got carried away when he thought he was going to be killed.
I mean, I don't remember the story precisely. Maybe our tour guide, because he's a sort of a New York historian of sorts, remembers Bernie. I don't know if you do.
Introduce him.
This is Andrew Kirshner, ED.capital D. Isn't that what Bill Cosby has? Right, it's like a doctor of education.
I haven't followed Bill Cosby's academic career.
But you are Dr. Kirshner, technically.
Talk closer to the mic.
You can call me Andrew.
Okay. But he has a doctorate in education. And he's a licensed New York City sightseeing tour guide, and he's a president, CEO, and chairman of the board of Epic Walking Tours, providing walking tours in Greenwich Village, New York, to educate, entertain, and inspire the public. We welcome Andrew Kirshner to our show.
I appreciate the invitation. It's an honor to be with all of you. I don't want to intimidate the three of you, but in the 7th grade, I won the award for best sense of humor.
That doesn't intimidate me.
We didn't have that award in 7th grade. We did have class clown in the yearbook, which I lost to Matt Shostak, who's now a math teacher. There's nothing funny about that. So do you recall the Bernie Getz incident and what
I do.
exactly happened to Bernie? Was he? I seem to remember they came out to him and said, "Hey, you got $1 or something like that."
They had sharpened screwdrivers.
Right. But that wasn't. They weren't exposed. I don't think when they approached Bernie, they might have been. I don't know.
I believe he was robbed on the subway by a few assailants, and they were fleeing, and he shot them in the back. And so the big debate was,
I think one of them got shot in the back, yeah.
over whether or not, right, that sounds right, over whether or not he had that right. And so it was a very divisive argument.
Well, Noam comes down squarely on the side of.
Yeah, I mean, I don't remember the facts. I remember at the time thinking, and you know,
Shot 4 young in 1984. Impressive. Bernard Getz shot 4 young black men on a New York City subway train in Manhattan after they tried to rob him. All 4 teenagers survived, though one was paralyzed and suffered brain damage as a result of his injuries. He fled to Vermont, Getz did, before surrendering to police 9 days after the shooting. He was charged with attempted murder, assault, reckless endangerment, and several firearms offensive.
he was convicted of a gun charge, right?
A jury subsequently found Getz guilty of 1 count of carrying an unlicensed firearm and acquitted him of the remaining charges. For the firearm offense, he served 8 months of a 1-year sentence.
Now think about.
Wait, in 96, KB obtained a $43 million civil judgment against Getz.
Now think about, from a criminal point of view, think about the injustice of that. The jury decided that he didn't commit a crime by shooting them, which meant that the jury thinks that he was within his rights to feel that he was so threatened that he needed to shoot them, at least beyond a reasonable doubt. But they want to put him in jail for having the gun, without which, if you go with the logic, they would have overwhelmed him in some way, perhaps killed him. Point is that there's a law. You can't have a gun, but you know what? You can't. If you as the city force people to feel that they're taking their lives in their hands, unless they have a gun, they're going to get guns. That's the bottom line.
Well, if you're going to have gun laws, they have to mean something. You can't just say, "Well, we're going to ignore the gun charge because." We felt that you were in your rights to shoot.
Yeah, you can.
I mean, there is a gun law on the books, and it has to be respected. Now,
you
might make the argument that we should just let everybody have guns, but if we're going to have gun laws, I would think.
Well, we have all kinds of laws we enforce at times. Listen, I get what you're saying, but gun laws should definitely be used to heap extra punishment on people who are committing crimes, aggressively committing crimes, and maybe if you just catch somebody on the street with a gun, I don't know.
Andrew, sorry. Do you have a firearm, Andrew Kirshner, in your line of work, touring the village? Potential danger, or people want to get a free tour, and you have to, and they won't go away.
I have a concealed carry permit.
I was kind of just joking around, but the guy's carrying. Yeah, well, that's surprising.
I spent many years early in my career working in prisons and jails. And I think when you have an experience like that, you become tragically, acutely aware of the dangers that surround.
What were you doing working in jails?
I was responsible for providing cognitive behavioral therapy and drug and substance abuse education to inmates.
Wow.
That's interesting. Are you carrying right now?
No.
Okay.
So how'd you get into street tours?
It's a good segue. Well, let me say, I have a deep interest in the history of New York. Growing up in New York, I was born in Tarrytown and raised in Croton. And
I live in Ardsley.
Okay, and spent a lot of my childhood in the city and Central Park, and we talked about Canal Street and other parts of the city.
You're from Tarrytown. You must have an opinion on the Tappan Zee Bridge becoming the Mario Cuomo.
I have an opinion, but that's not on the tour. But I think, like the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, I can probably link a lot of what we're talking about to the tour, including Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. John Barrymore starred in the play, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. He lived in the village. He dated Evelyn Nesbit. Evelyn Nesbit was married to Harry Thaw about 100 or so, 120 years ago. And Stanford White, who built the Washington Square Park Arch, allegedly raped Evelyn Nesbit. And that is a love triangle that I mentioned to you on the tour. Harry Thaw wound up killing Stanford White on the roof of the original Madison Square Garden, which was located on the northeast side of Madison Square Park, where the New York Life Insurance building is now. Apropos of nothing, but that's the Jekyll and Hyde link. Evelyn Nesbit dated John Barrymore, who acted in Jekyll and Hyde, and it's an interesting part of. It was the trial of the century. The Harry Nesbit, Harry Thaw, was found not guilty by reason of insanity. He was married to Evelyn Nesbit, and she accused Stanford White, who was one of the most famous architects in the city at the time, of sexually assaulting her.
Did I tell you the guy knows everything?
Robert Louis Stevenson wrote Jekyll and Hyde?
I think so. So I went on the tour, by the way, with my nephew, because I got 5 passes, but I only got one person who wanted to go. But anyway, so there's a lot there's a lot going on right here in your own neighborhood, Noam, that you probably aren't aware of. Did you know that Barbara Streisand got her start?
Yes, at the Bonsoir on.
Not exactly. Actually, Barbara Streisand, close. That's where the second place she performed. So a guy by the name of Barry Dennen lived on 9th Street, and he had just come from California, an actor, wealthy actor, and a friend of his said that they knew this 18-year-old woman who had been sweeping floors at the Cherry Lane Theater, which was, by the way, misnamed. It was supposed to be the Cheery Lane Theater, named after the Drury Lane Theater in England, but there was a misprint in the newspaper.
Wow.
And it became the Cherry Lane Theater. So Edna St. Vincent Millay, the founder of the Cherry Lane Theater, which just celebrated its 100th anniversary, kept the name Cherry Lane Theater. But Barbara Streisand was sweeping floors there. She was waiting tables. And a friend of Barry Dennen's said, I've got this woman who acts and sings I want to introduce you to. She went to his apartment, and he said, I tell you what, tomorrow night there is a singing, comedy, dance competition at the Lion, which was the bar next door to where Barry Dennen's apartment was. Barry Dennen's apartment downstairs was also the home of Trudy Heller's Go-Go Club. Trudy Heller, who had seen the Peppermint Club uptown, where Frank Sinatra and Marilyn Monroe and so many stars from that era used to hang out, and opened up this Go-Go Club. So Barbara Streisand went there and performed Sleeping Bee, the song Sleeping Bee. She won the competition. She won $50. And the manager of the Lion suggested that she go and perform at Bonsoir, which is what she did, where CBS wound up signing her to she wound up getting a record deal. The New York Times was there and wrote up a nice review on her performance. And after that, I think the manager said, you're going to be a star.
But here's that's interesting to me, because the idea that you're going to be a star because you have a good voice. Every Monday night, Noam has a music night here at the Olive Tree Cafe, and people are singing with world-class voices, and none of them are stars.
Well,
so how did Barbara Streisand become a star?
So that is that the same before? There's a record, Barbara Streisand at the Bonsoir.
Yeah. That's it.
That's
Sony recorded her at the Bonsoir, and it's on Spotify, and
Yeah.
I think you can get it on iTunes. And she's 18, and her voice is remarkable.
Okay, so I've heard that record.
Yeah, so that's her.
It's remarkable.
Yeah, it's stunning.
It is an unbelievable juggernaut of effusive talent.
Mhm.
That couldn't be denied. I mean, I could not believe what I was hearing. And if you're saying this is just like she's 18 years old, it's crazy. That's how good she was.
So you'd say that she is orders of magnitude better than somebody who goes on The Voice and does a great job.
Yes, yeah. The humor, the poise. Now, of course, plenty of people are told they're going to be a star and they don't become stars. It's not like, but I could totally see why people said that. And obviously, even to make the effort to make a pretty good quality recording of it indicated that they had a sense that something special was about to happen.
Yes. Well, at that time, so Woody Allen, Phyllis Diller, Joan Rivers, and others were performing in those clubs. So most of those clubs were mafia-owned. They were black tie, very late crowd, and they
Like
were
Tony Pastor's over here too, right?
Tony Pastor's. Obviously the Gaslight Cafe in later years. So a lot of those cafes and late night bars, they attracted a lot of talent. And of course, your neighbors at Cafe Wah in the 60s, Springsteen and Dylan and others, as you know, better than anyone. So, yeah, I mean, the Village, I'll say this about the Village. So Dan came on a tour. It was great to have him. We had a blast, a nice day. And that was the Village Variety
Were you
Tour.
carrying during the tour?
No.
In case my nephew overwhelmed you.
No, you guys were a delight. I also have another tour, which is the historical tour of the Village, which I would enjoy talking to you about.
You stop for coffee first?
No, I actually
You'd have to drag me on a historical tour of the Village. I'm sure you make it more interesting than anybody on planet Earth.
So the history of the
couldn't do
Village is fascinating, devastating, and hugely inspiring. Because I agree with your sentiment that probably a good replacement for melatonin would be to talk to people about the impact of the Industrial Revolution on cotton farming, I purposefully, painstakingly curated a tour that I thought would be engaging. So I've never been on a tour of the Village, and I did that intentionally. What I did instead was I took a deep dive in the archives of the New York Historical Society, the Library of Congress, and other sources, and I searched for inspiring and engaging events and people that people who advocated events that happened throughout the history of the Village, dating back to the early 17th century when the Dutch arrived and the Lenape Indians were living here. And so,
Was it a gay neighborhood when the Lenape Indians were here?
I did not see any documentation of homosexuality between the Lenape Indians, but I must admit that it was not my primary search criteria when I was looking for information about the Dutch East India Company and trading and the construction of the wall that the Dutch put up to prevent the Lenape Indians from attacking them, and that is the origin of the name Wall Street. There was a physical wall in the financial district. The Lenape Indians gave enslaved Africans land rights. The first black-owned land is at Washington Square Park in order, in part, to create a buffer between them and the Lenape Indians who were not amenable to their arrival in New York.
Who bought Manhattan for $10?
That was Peter Minuit.
Okay. So
Was-
there
I think
is
it
a
was-
lot of lore in the Village that I think is worth dispelling. So, for example, the Hangman's Elm on the northwest corner of Washington Square Park is neither an elm nor is there any evidence that anyone was ever hanged from it. The story goes that traders during the American Revolution were hanged from the elm. There's just no documentation of that. In terms of the dollar amount paid, so first, the Lenape did not have insight into, they didn't believe in land ownership, so it's not even clear that they knew what they're doing, nor is it clear how much was actually paid. I think what's more interesting is some of the development, the anglicizing of some of the names of parts of the village. So, for example, we're on McDougal Street. McDougal Street is named after John McDougal, who was the representative of New York to the Continental Congress, one of the founders of the Sons of Liberty, and an employee of George Washington and close friend of Alexander Hamilton. Manhattan is Dutch, was named by the Dutch, Mannahatta, the island of hills. Broadway came from the Dutch name Breedaway, which was Dutch for a wide trail. They took a Lenape trail and widened it, and that became Broadway. So,
can I ask you a question?
Also, Harlem was from a Dutch town. There's a Dutch
the
town,
Bronx
Harlem.
is someone's last name. So I think this is
The Bronx family. So when you were a teenager, did you collect baseball cards? This is obviously a personality trait. This is almost like I don't know what it is, but this is you're not an ordinary person. Like, you love this stuff, and this had to be part of you and your personality when you were a young child. So how did this manifest itself? When did your parents ever realize our son?
He was giving tours of the house.
Our son's a bit different.
You guys are so funny. First, I appreciate the compliment. I am honored to talk to people about people like Emma Lazarus and the victims at the Shirtwaist Triangle Factory and so many other people who...
You're putting me on now.
No, I'm serious. So to answer your question, I collected
Come on now.
baseball.
Am I being punked?
I'm super passionate about it. I collected baseball cards as a kid. In fact, I played Little League, and I had, I can still name the Yankees infield: Thurman Munson, Ron Guidry, Chris Chambliss, Bucky Dent, Willie Randolph, Craig Nettles, Mickey Rivers, Lou Piniella, and Reggie Jackson.
There you go.
Used
There
to
you
go
go. I
see
knew
those
it.
guys play. But no, I mean it.
And
Emma,
which Yankee Stadium was that? How many Yankee Stadiums ago was that?
that was the last Yankee Stadium. We've only had two since 1923, the house that Ruth built. Yeah. So
Is it true that Ruth didn't actually build the stadium?
he did not. You are correct, Dan. He did not actually build the stadium. He would have been too exhausted to hit 60 home runs, which, by the way, here comes Kevin Bacon. Hank Greenberg hit 58 home runs. He won 2 MVP awards and won 2 World Series titles with the Detroit Tigers. He was born in Greenwich Village. He lived for his first year of life about a block from Cafe Society on Barrow Street. And he was the first Jewish superstar athlete, and he served longer than anyone else in World War II. And he was the first professional Major League Baseball player to welcome Jackie Robinson to the big leagues. There's your baseball reference.
All right, very good. And what happened in that building? Right, was that Louisa May Alcott? Who lived in the building across the street, the red one? Right?
I don't know where you're pointing because we're inside a building.
No, look out the window. Just when I point, it's because I want you to look.
That's
McDougal Street. There's a red
I
building.
cannot say that I know that is not on the tour. So
You need to. So that building right across the street, I think it's where Louisa May Alcott wrote Little Women or something, because it's landmarked because somebody famous lived there.
All right. Since you disparaged Emma Lazarus, may I tell you about Emma Lazarus?
What are
I
you
wasn't
saying
disparaging
about
Emma
it?
Lazarus.
I'm just kidding.
Go ahead.
Yes. Oh, you thought I was joking. I think Emma Lazarus is probably...
No, I was laughing because I asked you about your childhood and you brought up Emma Lazarus.
Okay, what would you like to know about my childhood? I had a tremendous childhood. I was...
Do you remember every day of your... Like, well, how deep does this memory go?
I think it would be pretentious for me to answer that question.
No, no, not
I will
pretentious.
say I was born in Tarrytown. Tarrytown is the home of the Headless Horseman, the Washington Irving a story about the Hessian soldier who has a cannonball decapitate him, and he's riding
What does
around.
Hessian mean?
That's a German.
German
Hess.
soldier. He was fighting in the American Revolution.
Well,
against
Hess-
the British.
I knew that. So it's for purpose.
Come on, Noam. You
Well,
gotta
Hess,
know
it
that.
was Hess was I think.
Tell him, Dan.
I think
mean, this
Hess
is-
was one of the principalities in Germany, right? There's Hess, and there was like Bavaria, whatever, you know.
Okay. Hessian soldier.
Okay. So the moral of this story is don't lose sight of reality. He's running around searching for a soul without a head. But Washington Irving lived in the Village, and he was the first great American. He's considered the father of American literature. About 20 years. So I'll tell you what I think is a fascinating story.
I have one more question before you tell me that. Are your parents like this?
Would it be a personality?
Yeah, like is this like at dinner at your house? Did you all just catalog? Like, did your mother use a cookbook, or she just memorized the recipes? Like,
I don't think we used cookbooks.
is it a genetic? I'm being killed, but is there a genetic trait that this is unusual?
Right. My father was very passionate about history.
I wish I had this kind of recall.
Do you have siblings, and are they?
I have a sister. She is a brilliant artist, and
Do you ever forget
great
anything?
human.
What do you ever forget?
I feel like answering your questions
Well,
honestly would
but
be
Noam, he
pretentious.
studies this. So if you
No,
study
this
something,
is not studying.
Okay.
This is interest.
So it's so fascinating. So Washington Irving is this great American writer at only picture about 20 years after the country starts, right here, living right here. And so it's the turn of the century, the early 19th century. And the owner of a hotel on Mulberry Street in Chinatown puts an ad in the newspaper.
It wasn't Chinatown then, was it? Was it Chinatown then?
No,
Okay.
I don't believe so. Present day Chinatown. And he puts an ad in the newspaper, this owner of the hotel, and he says, I have found a manuscript by a guy by the name of Diedrich Knickerbocker. And this gentleman is supposedly walking around wild on the streets. He skipped his bill. I've got the manuscript. He's putting these ads, this hotel owner in the newspaper, searching for this guy, Diedrich Knickerbocker. He says he's got the manuscript. The manuscript is titled The History of the World Through the Country Through the Dutch Dynasty. Now, at this time, 20 years into the founding of the country, there was a great thirst for a great admiration and jealousy of European history because other countries had thousands of years of history, and this was a nascent country. And so there was great fascination from the media. They wanted to find this Diedrich Knickerbocker so they could publish this manuscript and learn about the founding of the early years of this country. And it created a great firestorm. And it turned out it was all a ruse. The owner, the hotel was fictitious. It was a farce. There was no hotel. There was no Diedrich Knickerbocker. There was no manuscript. This was a strategic tactic that Washington Irving used at age 26 in the early 1800s to build his interest in his literary career. It was basically he had written a satirical piece with some facts inserted about the history of New York. Now, even though he later divulged that this was a farce, this became the most popular book in the city, and they named the fire department Knickerbocker. They named bread Knickerbocker bread. They named hotels Knickerbocker hotels. Somebody actually ran for the House of Representatives in New York and changed his last name to Knickerbocker because Diedrich Knickerbocker, even though he never existed, became the founding father of New York and a great source of pride, thus the name the New York Knickerbockers. And
Which,
for
by the way,
Wow.
is a team from the National Basketball Association.
And also the restaurant on the corner of 9th Street and University.
Yes. So
Is that a real name, though, Knickerbocker? I mean,
it's completely made up. So
it's not like a name that anybody has.
no, in later years, he wrote Rip Van Winkle, the story about this man, as we all know, who fell asleep for 20 years and realized how life passes you by. But this was a springboard for his career.
What's the name of the author who also wrote a fraudulent book?
J.T. Leroy or Leroy.
Clifford Irving?
Are you thinking of Descartes? Are you thinking of Don Quixote?
Cervantes?
Yes.
No, you don't. Clifford Irving. It would be funny if it's Irving because it's both Irving. Clifford Irving, American novelist.
Clifford Irving.
He's
right
best
there.
known.
There, it's up. It's on the screen.
Oh, he wrote a fake. He is best known for an autobiography allegedly written to told by Billy. It was a fictional work. It was a fake. He wrote a fake Howard Hughes book. You don't remember this?
I haven't read it.
Aha!
You got me.
I can't believe that came to me.
So a lot of people don't know Irving Place in Gramercy Park is named after Washington Irving. He
Wow.
also had a house on Irving Place.
But the Irving family is a bunch of frauds.
Well, I'm not here to pass judgment on the Irvings.
Now, why was Washington Irving named Washington? Was he named after George Washington? It's a weird first name. Is it a pen name?
Yes. He used a lot of pseudonyms. I don't know the origin of his first name.
Well, I mean, I assume that George Washington was from an area in England, maybe that was maybe called Washington. Oh. Anyway, I do want to talk about the history of the Comedy Cellar a bit because that's on your tour. That
He
we
knows
took.
more than I do for sure.
Well, that was on your tour. Was the history? We stopped. We went. We talked about Reggio and the first cappuccino machine. Did you know that, Noam?
I know that was it. They have a sign there.
Okay, all right. And then we stopped in front of the Comedy Cellar, and you do this on every tour, or just because I was there.
I do it on every tour. So yeah, Cafe Reggio is a fascinating story because it began as a barbershop, and the owner, a guy by the name of Parisi, was giving coffee to his patrons at the barbershop, and they seemed to like the coffee more than the haircut. And so he opened in this about 100 years ago, opened this coffee shop. And yeah, it has the first cappuccino machine. It's got the ceiling fan from Casablanca. Godfather 2 was filmed in it, and John Kennedy in 1959 made a speech in front of Cafe Reggio. But I think
and it's in the movie Shaft, and there's a song, Cafe Reggio, in the soundtrack for Shaft by Isaac Hayes.
It's been in a lot of movies and it's been written up a lot, and it's a popular place. But I think what fascinated me about listening to the history and founding of the Comedy Cellar, and this is I think analogous to me giving strategic military advice to George Washington. So I'm going to just stick my toe in this.
Oh, I don't care. You don't have to worry about it.
Water. Because
I'll cut it out. Go ahead.
Yeah. I think what was fascinating to me is a few things. One, that the founder saw just the steps and his vision that he had, and I think that'll resonate with a lot of people, being able to see something that isn't built yet.
I just want to mention that you talked about Bill Grunfest, but it was Manny Dorman, Noam's father, that instituted a lot of the things you're talking about.
I didn't want to be petty.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely. And, I think when Grunfest talks about finding Stephen Wright in Boston, that's interesting.
He told you he found Stephen? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Did Stephen Wright work here?
I think he did.
Yeah.
I haven't seen Stephen Wright in a while. I mean,
He would never record on it, but I think he was here at some point.
And Jon Stewart crediting
for
him
sure.
for helping to launch his career.
That's 100%. Jon Stewart was working at Panchitos. Panchitos not there anymore, but Panchitos.
maybe you could put that in your tour. Where's Panchitos?
105
and
at
Dave
Douglas.
Chappelle,
It's that
Jerry
Greek
Seinfeld,
restaurant.
and some Louis C.K.
Seinfeld, not so much, but yeah.
Yeah, but I mean an early performer.
Yeah.
Would you like to hear about Emma Lazarus?
Well, we could delve a little bit more into the cellar, just so you are better armed, for your tour.
Yes.
Now, have you ever had a
love
fight
it.
break out with a family on one of these tours? They just can't fucking stand each other.
My greatest worry, and Dan knows this, is that my highest priority is not educating, inspiring. It's protecting people from the e-bike delivery drivers when we're crossing the street. Yeah, this is my greatest concern. It's a little.
You carry insurance for that?
I haven't been able to
I
get
signed a
insurance.
waiver. I must
Yeah.
confess I didn't read a word of it.
Right.
But I clicked,
Right.
as I always do.
In the waiver, it says if you get struck by a delivery bike driver, you are wholly responsible for your death.
Does it really say that?
No.
Okay. But it says it does say something, I assume, about getting hit by a car. I didn't read it, but
Yes.
but I guess it means if you get hit by a car.
Now, okay, my family and I took a private tour of Disney.
Very similar.
And well, it's only similar because it's a private tour, right? And then we're supposed to tip at the end,
Right.
and we had no fucking idea. What do you tip a private tour at Disney?
What were you expecting?
What would you
it to-
tip?
How much was the tour?
It was like, let's say it's like $800 a person, something like that.
I have to increase my price. $800 a
A
person.
person?
So a tour.
But it includes no lines at every ride
Oh.
all day at Disney World.
all right.
Oh, that's different. Okay.
Yeah, but this
am-
includes no lines at Emma Lazarus' house.
I know it. I appreciate the Emma Lazarus reference. I cannot speak. I cannot speak on the Disney tours. That is not my area of expertise. But in terms of New York City, most New York City walking tours are 2 hours, and those tours typically range from about $39 to $79. I've priced my tours at $39. If I was going on tips, gratuities are optional on tours. If I was going on a tour for $39, I would probably tip $10 to $15 per person.
Now, what ethnic group would you say are the best tippers? Okay.
Wait, $15 on a 30. That's like a 30.
Well, that's a cheap. So have you eaten dinner? Have you ordered an entree in New York City recently?
Yeah, and I want to talk about that with
So
inflation.
you're getting 2 hours of entertainment that is pretty well curated, and it's a physical job, and you're getting photo visuals, and I think most people would agree it's a if you compare some other 2 hour activities like, for example, a show or
But you
dinner.
don't
it's
tip
pretty,
you don't tip at a show.
Yeah.
I didn't know that touring was a tip oriented. I'm sorry, I didn't leave you a tip.
Oh, Dan.
Dan.
You're
I haven't.
raised by-
I've been thinking about it ever since.
You're raised by wolves?
Well, I didn't realize that a tour was a tipping. When you go to see a Broadway show, you don't tip.
Tour.
You don't tip at a Broadway show?
No, do you?
No, but you tip a tour guide.
But you're
didn't
not.
realize
But in a
it.
Broadway show, you're not going backstage after, unless you're Gnome, and so you're not interacting face to face with the people. But yeah, on tours.
But did the
typically-
Germans leave you a tip? It was me, my nephew, and it's these Germans.
Dan, I cannot comment on the tipping practices of
the
other
Hessians.
people on the tour. It would be inappropriate.
I can't believe you didn't tip. It's not too late.
Well, I think it'd be a little awkward now, but I'll tell you what.
No.
we give you a half off on the food here.
Can I order off the entire menu, or is it the
I
pre
think-
1980 policy of only
What
ordering
was there?
half
Was
of the
there
menu?
was there ever a menu policy here to not order? Like you,
There still is. I mean, I think the policy was always half off for the comedians, but there were times when like food spots,
Yeah.
like late night spots, where they could order off certain, but they couldn't order the steak. Like they could order, it was never stingy.
This is something interesting. You may or may not want to include. I don't know, but here's something that you may or may not want to include. The Comedy Cellar that we know today as the premier club in New York City, the most popular club, wasn't always that way. Back in the 90s and the early 2Ks, you might have 10 people in the room late as the hours wore on.
If you were lucky.
And so what they used to do is have something called food spots, where it was amateurs basically, and I would do those. And after midnight, you would have the comics that were less seasoned, less experienced, mostly still had day jobs, and they would go on after midnight, and they would not get paid. they would get paid in food, and it was called the Food Spot. And
So could you order anything off the menu?
I don't remember. But,
There's no way you could, because certain items you can't give away to.
and I don't know if it was like unlimited, like you could order like dessert and whatever it was, but they were for newer comics.
I mean, in any restaurant, when you start comping things, there's certain meat, which would have been cheaper to pay the comedians than to start handing out meat. So. Certain meat.
But anyway, the club became so popular that they had to phase out the Food Spot because they didn't want to put amateurs on anymore, because now they had full houses, people with expectations. The club became popular so that you wouldn't put amateurs on.
No,
Is that sort of the evolution of
food spots is something you do when you really have no choice. It's not like
well, you had no choice because
there's no money,
and also because you didn't have the comics didn't want to work after midnight anyway, so you had to throw the amateurs
No,
on.
I mean, my most of my life, despite what people think, was we were suffering financial anxiety always. We were always kind of broke and, struggling to make ends meet, especially in the early days of the Comedy Cellar when it was empty. At that time, the Comedy Cellar was being supported by either the Cafe Fiend John or the Cafe Wa at times.
Is the Fiend John, well, this is something else I'm a little unclear on. Is the Fiend John, is that where the Wa is now?
Yeah.
So so it was the Wa back in the 60s.
The original Cafe Wa closed in 1968. I don't know if you know this. The original Cafe Wa closed in 1968.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was had a little like sporadic thing. Richie Havens had a club there. There was a club called Duke's Dilemma. There was some other thing. And then my father took over the room in 1973 or so, and he had the Fiend John there for until I finally changed the name in 88 back to the Cafe Wa. And when I changed the name back to the Cafe Wa, nobody had even heard of the Cafe Wa anymore. Like I remember having to explain to everybody, like, what kind of stupid name is that? And I said, well, that's the place where Jimi Hendrix was discovered. And then the Cafe Wa, when I had it, became way more famous than the original Cafe Wa had been. And then it just kind of, the whole old history of the Cafe Wa was rediscovered. I wouldn't even know till much later that Bruce Springsteen had actually started there, the Castiles.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody brought me a picture of that. But we knew that Hendrix had started there, and I knew that Dylan had played there a couple of times, but Dylan wasn't really actually associated that closely with the Cafe Wa. Mm-hmm. He had actually played in my father's first Fiend John, and he played at the Gaslight in Folk City, or Folk City was over there. So, and now I sound like him.
If you're interested, on my website, epicwalkingtours.com, I recently interviewed Hap Pardo, the director of musical operations at Cafe Wa, and I wrote a separate article on the history of Cafe Wa that includes some photos that you might not have seen before.
Yeah, well, those guys wrote me out of the whole Cafe Wa, but the truth is, I remember the Cafe Wa since I was a little boy. It was a clip joint. And the Village in those days, you could see little clips of it on the movie The President's Analyst. You ever see that movie? You would love that movie. It has clips of the Village. The Village, when I was a kid, McDougal Street was so crowded, you couldn't even get a car through. It was just fucking mobbed in the 60s. And the Cafe Wa was one of these places, was even open during the day. And they would just bring people in, like tourists or whatever it is, and play crappy music. And then when they needed a turnover, Manny Roth would turn off the air conditioning and people would leave and get a turnover that way. And he'd started in the 50s and it was relatively short lived. And it was free admission was their calling card. And they would just have a collection of acts, this one, hundreds of different acts, which is why Hendrix was discovered there. As I said, it went out of business in 68, and 68 was still a vital time to be open in the Village. Then the Village in the 70s really became just like junkies everywhere. But, and like I said, then the place was closed for 20 years and forgotten, pretty much forgotten. And when I always regretted renaming it the Cafe Wa, because I'd actually started the house band concept that the Cafe Wa has now in my father's place in the Cafe Fiend John. And we had a line to come in. And then we did a big party where we changed the name to Cafe Wa, which in retrospect was one of the biggest mistakes of my life, because then I never became associated with that. Everybody thinks the Cafe Wa is this old place, but really it has nothing to do with the old Cafe Wa except that it's the same location. And when I had the Cafe Wa, I did very little to draw on the old reputation of the Cafe Wa because I didn't really want to tie myself to it because it bothered me that I wouldn't get credit for what I'd created. But now that's very much what they do. It's Cafe Wa. But and they've done a great job, but they have written me out of the history. I mean, even the best musicians who still sing there were the ones I hired.
Now, well, I don't know if you want to integrate any of that into your tour.
No, don't say that.
No, I won't. I wouldn't say that. Well, I will share with you that I have been to the Comedy Cellar.
And there. I mean, I don't want to get Hap is a good guy. They're all good guys. You know, they do what they do for their own interests. They don't have to worry about me.
Are you about to say you've been to the Comedy Cellar?
Many times. It is hilarious. It's such a great room, and it's my favorite comedy club.
Thank you for that.
And now I guess we'll end with Emma Lazarus, as we must.
Even that cafe.
I can tell you a joke if you want to make
That
this
Cafe
smoother.
Wall logo with the moon and the guitar thing. I designed that logo.
What's a clip joint?
Clip joint it's like a tourist. It's like you get people in, get people out. You don't really care about anything other than to grab the money and get them out. It wasn't a place that the Cafe Wa became, which was and still is like really dedicated. It's like a music version of what the Comedy Cellar is, like really dedicated to having fantastic music and fantastic everything, you know, and food and service and all that stuff. But when I sold the Cafe Wa, there was a line around the block to get in 7 nights a week.
But why did you sell it then?
7, because the landlord, Donald Goldman, who used to own the Players Theater, which maybe talk about, he was playing cutesy with me about giving me another lease. And I didn't know what to do. And my father had died, and I had the Cellar, and I had the Fat Black Pussycat around the corner, I had the Village Underground, I had the Cafe Wa, and it was more than I could handle. And I figured I'm just gonna sell it. I needed to throw in with what was secure for me, and what was secure for me was the Comedy Cellar, where I owned the real estate, and around the corner where I had 15 years of lease ahead of me, and I saw my time running out there, and so I sold it. Also, it took a lot of work. It was a lot of work.
Well, you were in the band, who you would play every night.
It was all too much for me. But and I've gone down there I think twice since then, since I sold it. I don't ever regret selling it.
Now that leads us inevitably to Emma Lazarus.
Yeah, there's two people and one place I would love to share the history of with you. That's Henry Berg, the founder of the ASPCA, who worked and lived in the Village, Emma Lazarus, and the Jefferson Market Courthouse, which is now the Jefferson Market Library. You know, I think taking a tour in the Village it's hard to imagine that there is a comparable place to take a tour in the United States. If you think about I heard you talking about politics earlier, but the growth of neo-totalitarianism throughout the world today, the absence of the right to be gay, to be a woman and vote, to have...
Are you gay?
No.
Are you a woman?
No.
Okay, go ahead.
In dozens of countries throughout the world, I think it's easy for us to take for granted what it is like to live in a country where as the people who were at the Stonewall Inn in the 1960s could tell you, there was no gay pride. There was gay shame and there was gay fear. Immigrants who were not permitted. There was a 10-year moratorium, a 10-year ban following on Chinese immigrants coming to this country following the gold rush in 1849, the 49ers. The Chinese Exclusion Act prevented Chinese workers from coming to this country for 10 years. If you were black in this country, if you were working in a sweatshop like the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory and were working 12 hours a day, 7 days.
There was a fire there, right? That's what the fire
Yes.
was. Yeah.
7 days a week. If you went to the bathroom too long, you were docked a half day's pay, not lacking proper fire exits and sprinklers. So when we think about human rights, labor rights, immigration, people of color, gay rights, women's suffrage. What I would want people to know is that the genesis of us enjoying those privileges today were so much of that fight happened in the village. Courageous people who often went to jail, women who protested the working conditions in the years.
Can I add free speech to that with Lenny Bruce right across the street being arrested for
free speech, and certainly Edna St. Vincent Millay and many others and Margaret Anderson at the Little Review, and Mae West on Broadway in the play Sex, who was arrested under the Comstock Act by the Society for the Suppression of Vice for public obscenity and jailed at the Jefferson Courthouse. We owe a debt of gratitude to these people. So for me, to stand in front of a house where Emma Lazarus lived is so incredibly.
Well, where is her house?
It is on 10th Street, next to Mark Twain's house.
That's
not on the tour.
It's not on the tour. I went on. That's a history.
First of all,
No.
I want to contact.
Because you weren't tipping, I took you on a tour that did not include Emma Lazarus.
Max, I want you to
No.
contact the Guinness organization. Ask them if there's a record for the most mentions of Emma Lazarus in a podcast.
I'm on it.
But Emma Lazarus was the
What did you say about Emma Lazarus?
she was the woman who wrote Emma Lazarus.
Oh, Emma Lazarus.
Was the woman who wrote the poem on the Statue of Liberty.
The new Colossus.
Thank you. Give me as our
See if you get it
Refuse.
right.
Wretched
You're
refuse.
tired.
You're sick. You're hungry.
well.
Now
our-
you're sick.
People, no.
You're poor.
People
You're
poor.
tired,
Yearning to be free.
What kind of masses?
tired, you're
Huddled
huddled.
masses.
Huddled masses. What were they yearning,
Yearning
to do?
to
Be free.
They were yearning to breathe free. Oh,
But there was an
breathe?
episode of
Close enough.
There
What
was
about
episode-
wretched refuse? Where's that?
Have you
Close-
yeah, it's in
yes.
there too.
No,
but
they weren't
there was an
wretched.
episode of All in the Family where Archie Bunker says, "Yeah, the poem, the Statue of Liberty. Give me you're tired, you're poor, you're deadbeats."
Yeah, get me.
She
Well,
was
Archie
Jewish,
Bunker-
wasn't she?
She was a Jewish immigrant from Europe who, when she came here writing poetry at only 16 years old, went directly to the tenement buildings to, as Jacob Riis did and documented, the photojournalist in the book, How the Other Half Lives, to document the great divide on the heels of the Gilded Age, which Edith Wharton had written about, and from the Age of Innocence, who, by the way, also lived in the village. She was a tremendous advocate for human rights. And for, at this time, the great irony is that for Jews coming from Europe, for
Are you
Africans.
Jewish?
I'm Jewish, yes. Yes.
Good.
You can stay.
Yes, I'm permitted to use the word Jews. Yes. I think it was Dave Chappelle recently said that nothing ever good happens after you start a sentence, those Jews.
The Jews.
Or
Yeah,
the
the Jews.
Jews,
The
yeah.
Jews, right. Yes. So the Jews who were trying to immigrate, unless you're Jewish, who were trying to immigrate from Europe, and the Chinese who were unsuccessfully trying to immigrate following the gold rush. So this is one of the most misunderstood stories in American history. The meaning of the Statue of Liberty when it was donated was not to be this beacon of welcoming immigrants to Ellis Island. That is myth. A French abolitionist came up with the idea to donate this statue, which came in 218 boxes, by the way. We had to put it together. Thanks, France.
It was like the
And-
IKEA.
It was the IKEA. I mean, they
its
could have
time.
put some of it together. It's a lot of work. So this was a gift to sell. He was an abolitionist. Originally, the chains on her feet were around. They were shackles around her wrists. It was celebrating the end of the Civil War and France's friendship with the United States. It did not have anything to do with welcoming people from other countries. The sculptor of that statue, Frederick Auguste Bertoldi,
He spread them all over the world. The Statue of Liberty is all over the world,
all over the world.
right? There's like 5 of them.
There's you can get it at a gift shop in Times Square.
No, there's
You can
real
get it
ones.
for
There's
a
real
few
ones that he
dollars.
made.
Well, tourists would tell you those are real. They're just small.
Look up other Statue of Liberty.
Well, there's one in Vegas. at New York,
Statues
New
of
York.
Liberty.
That's right. And that one, yes.
Not New York, New York.
That's pretty recent, though. So because this was a period of high unemployment at the time, New Yorkers were suffering in poverty. There was a great backlash to spend money.
Okay. There are 2 genuine statues and several lesser versions of the Statue of Liberty. These are real ones.
The second is located in Paris, France, and was a reciprocal gift from the United States in 1889. That's insane. We gave one back to them.
We should have just given back ours.
Yeah, we could have saved a lot of money.
How did you know? You didn't know this?
I'm familiar. Okay, so, so
Are you impressed, Max?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
that was impressive. Okay. That was impressive.
The village. The Statue of Liberty is not in the village. So
I'm just saying.
not part of his jurisdiction.
I was saying there was a bunch of them. He's making fun of me. Like I was trinkets.
Thank you. My attorney, Dan, has defended me successfully.
Okay.
So
now that I know you're Jewish, I expect a higher standard from you. Go ahead.
I apologize for letting you down. I'll try to make up ground with my Henry Berg story.
Well, we are running short. Could we just finish up the Emma Lazarus and
yes,
and those and let those who want to come on your tour hear about these other great stories.
So she wrote the sonnet, The New Colossus, to help raise money. There were fundraising campaigns to raise money to construct the Statue of Liberty. The crown of the Statue of Liberty for years sat in Madison Square Park. Kids could climb it for 5 cents as a fundraiser. Wow. And so this poem was aspirational. It did not reflect the...
Like River to the Sea. Go ahead.
And so this poem was added to the pedestal in later years, and this became the symbol of the Statue of Liberty after Emma Lazarus died of cancer at 38 years old. Her friend, Georgina Schuyler, who was the sister of Louisa Schuyler, who also has a history in the village, and the great-granddaughter of Alexander Hamilton, found the poem in a book and decided to push for it to be included on the Statue of Liberty. It was originally just used for an auction to raise money.
So she didn't live to see her.
She never lived to know what this meant to people and how it changed the narrative for the Statue of Liberty and created a society that became more welcoming of immigrants. Because the year before she wrote that poem, the federal government had passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which banned for immigrants for 10 years for coming to the United States. So it was not a reflection of current practices in the country.
So it was a poem about what?
It was a poem about giving us your tired and your poor and huddled masses so they could have
people
opportunities.
Breathing to be free. Right, but I'm saying like she wrote, it's just like, what was she...
The Colossus referred to this statue, and her prophecy was that our nation would live up to its ideals.
So she did write it for the statue.
Yes.
Oh, I see. I understand. Okay, and that makes sense.
Yeah, the Colossus refers to the Statue of Liberty. Yes.
All right. Well, that's amazing. That's an amazing wealth of knowledge that you have.
Thank you.
I feel like I should tip you now.
And we hope we certainly welcome to use any of the stuff about the Comedy Cellar on your tour that we discussed.
I will do that.
Yes, and you might want to also mention that we have great steak and chicken kebabs are a standout.
No,
Henry Berg would not like that. He was an animal.
I believe we
advocate.
are the first hummus. Not here. My father's on 7th Avenue. I think it was the first hummus in Manhattan. The old menus, we have them somewhere, it used to say, I tell you this already? It had hummus on the menu, and it said, hummus. If you don't know what it is, ask your waitress, she'll find out.
Why don't you put that back? That's amazing.
Now hummus is so, I mean, you can go to the supermarket.
Yeah.
And
what? It's so funny.
You get Stacy's, what is that, Stacy's, the hummus brand?
I don't know, but that's how obscure it was.
At every supermarket. Or something.
And we also were known far and wide to be one of the places that was gay friendly. Like in the 60s, my father's rule was he would only hire women and gays. And it sounds very noble, but he didn't want any straight men because he wanted to have wanted as many opportunities That's the way the world was.
Wait, so
but-
when did it, so
so I don't know.
That is
pick your poison.
unbelievable.
But he always had.
but the restaurant, so the Comedy Cellar Comedy Room started in 82 or 81, whatever it was. The restaurant, the Olive Tree Cafe, started when?
69, but it would moved from originally on 7th Avenue and Commerce Street, opened 1960.
And where did the stained glass come from?
I mean, the Star of David down there,
Yeah, and the stained glass in the window.
various places. That some auction of some old synagogue,
Wow.
and the stained glass, the one in the window that has my father's name, was obviously custom made. Fancy, what a coincidence! And then in the olive trees, some of that comes from an old ice cream parlor, and some of it comes from a very famous old Chinese restaurant called the Great Shanghai, which you probably don't know about. It's on the Upper West Side.
And when did the idea for having blackboard tabletops with chalk come in? Was that?
No, so my father bought the slate table somewhere, I think also at an auction, and a customer came in and said, "Hey, Manny, you should put some chalk on those tables." So it wasn't even the concept.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And he said, "Oh, yeah, it's a good idea. I should put some chalk on those."
That's so great.
Yeah. And then, of course, so many things have changed. So now, just the novelty of being able to write on the tables is just not what it once was, because everybody's just used to writing everywhere, But at the time, it was huge.
But people still always draw on the tables.
we always showed Charlie Chaplin movies. So in my lifetime, I saw it go from a 16 millimeter projector to an Advent that film cartridges to a big screen TV to VHS to DVD and finally to digital. And I've seen every iteration of technology to play these chat movies. In the old days, we were petrified about the FBI coming in to crash it. There's all sorts of stuff. It's just interesting how things have changed. Anyway.
Okay, well, Andrew Kirshner, licensed New York City sightseeing tour guide.
Licensed.
Yes, the Department of Consumer Affairs requires you to pass a state exam.
Like massage therapists.
Very similar, the same topics.
If you want to get a tour of the village, just visit his website. The website is
epicwalkingtours.com. I kept it simple.
Okay.
That's an amazing amount of information you have. I am really quite impressed.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.
And it's podcast at comedycellar.com. Is that the right?
Yeah.
Podcast at comedy. I haven't plugged it in so long.
Yeah.
Podcast at comedycellar.com. I would also mention giraffe, pen, saxophone. Okay.
Pen, giraffe, saxophone.
Well, the order doesn't matter.
Oh, that was the order.
Okay.
You don't get extra points for the order?
Well, maybe you do. I never, Anyway, thank you so much. We thank you, Andrew Kirshner, and thank you, Periel. Thank you, Max Marcus. Working sound. Bye-bye.